Joined by political analyst Ntsikelelo Breakfast, who's joining me by Skype. Mr. Breakfast, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for being on ENCA. I was reading in the Daily Maverick saying that two people, I believe, from the DA leadership said what they've done here is they've emerged as a clear alternative. And I wonder if that is indeed the case, and if so, an alternative for who?
Well, first of all, I think the fact that we're talking about black and white in this debate signifies that race as a sociological construct is a phenomenon that cannot be negated, and that race is a central way of examining things in the South African body politic. I think the DA has had a lot of good black leaders, but the challenge is that the environment in which they find themselves in is not suitable for them. A case in point is Musi Maimane. He had a fallout with some people, and then he was booted out. Another case in point is Lindwe Mazibuko. I think at some point there was an appreciation by some black leaders that they were going to turn the ship around, but I think they are experiencing some kind of a pushback. I think also it's a grave concern that the party has adopted the philosophical tradition of non-racialism. Non-racialism can be a destination, but you can't say that in a country like ours, which has class contradictions along the lines of race, that you are going to transcend beyond racial classification. The other problem with non-racialism is that it doesn't have any historical appreciation, nor does it have a historical imagination. So I think it will not sit well with the majority of black people, simply because they might see it as a way of blocking transformation.
And just on that, the DA again today is saying, look, there's no purge of the black leadership in the party, but when you go back as far as Lindwe Mazibuko, who, of course, in the headlines was seen as she left the Democratic Alliance because of a clash with Helen Zille, who was then a party leader. That's what was said at the time. You've got Musi Maimane, who's gone. You've got Herman Mashaba, who's gone. You've got John Moody, who's left in just the last few weeks. How convincing, then, are the explanations by the party itself that there isn't a purge, especially of black leadership?
No, I think that is a weak argument. I think the DA, in doing damage control, they must acknowledge that because racism manifests itself through social systems and social interactions, the DA is not an exception. That the DA also is grappling with this challenge of racism. Because now, if the DA is full of denialism, then the DA strikes me the same as the ANC now, which sometimes denies the obvious. I think the writing is on the wall that things are falling apart, and that the way things are is not the way things should be.
And just back to the issue of policy. The DA, Gwen Ngwenya, was speaking to us here on ENC, I think it was last night, and she was saying, look, the reality is with their policies, when they do indeed address inequality and that sort of thing, if indeed, as is the case in South Africa, the reality, the majority of the people who are affected by the inequality are black, there's no need to have race in the definition of the policies. But if that is the case, you could also argue then, why is there a need for the organization to be so strongly pushing to remove a race-based classification when indeed the majority poor, the majority dispossessed are indeed black in South Africa?
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head on that score, simply because the history of black people is the history of oppression. Everyone knows that. So there is no way you can spin this one, because the problem is that if you are going to implement, a non-racialism at the moment, then you are maintaining the state of affairs. Because the question is, who benefits at the moment out of this debate on a non-racialism? It's not the majority of the people who are on the margins of the economy.
Let me ask you about two people who've left the organization. You've got Herman Mashaba, who started his own thing. Musi Maimane hasn't launched a political party per se, but there are ambitions and murmurs depending on who you listen to. As things stand, do you think political formations by those two men would be the greatest risk to the DA as far as electoral performance is concerned, especially in the next year?
Well, I think it could have been better if the two leaders that you spoke about earlier on had joined forces, because it means that they would have worked side by side. But anyway, I think the new kid on the block by Herman Mashaba does pose a threat to the DA, because it strikes me as a party that is embraced across the racial divide. I don't think that it is only supported by black people. I think there are white people who see it as a way out of the crisis that the country is finding itself in.
Tsigelelo Breakfast, political analyst, speaking to us about the outcomes of the DA's policy conference. Good to speak to you, sir.